Hello there. Welcome to the Jaybefaunt channel. I am your host, James Fauntleroy. So good to see all of you here on this beautiful day. The Jaybefaunt channel is available on all major podcast platforms, so go ahead and subscribe there. Also part of Revolutionary Blackout Network, so you can find me there on Sundays and Thursdays. So thank you so much for joining the stream. If you have not already, you guys can go to my Substack at jaybefaunt.substack.com. This will alert you as far as email notifications whenever I go live, upload clips, or write any articles. So you guys have that there. If you guys have not already, go ahead and like the stream. But if you want to wait until the end to see if you want to like or dislike, that's fine with me too. There you go. And do that whenever you wish. Now, what are we getting into today? Well, we're doing the Will to Change reading again. We're getting into chapter 4, part do. This is going to be a continuation of talking about men and violence. So last time we were reading about how men are conditioned because of the patriarchal system to carry out violence more because it is useful to the system. It is useful to capitalism. It's useful to imperialism for us to essentially take our emotions and put them to the side and become more warrior robots, as it were. And so we're constantly being conditioned by this. But one of the things that was also brought out is that there's also internalized patriarchy that's also exists within women. And some women can even reinforce this patriarchal narrative, especially single parent mothers with boys. And so we have to be careful with this. And we're going to be getting even deeper into this. And I just want to preface this by saying that this is extremely important for all people to listen to. This isn't just for just one group or another. We all have a part to play when participating in this system. So I think that's really important. But while that being said, we're going to get into this book. We're going to start on page 65, and we're continuing on in this chapter. And if you guys have your own copy, follow along. And the Will Change by Bell Hooks. Ever since I started writing about love, I have defined it in a way that blends M. Scott Peck's notion of love as the will to nurture one's own and another's spiritual and emotional growth, with Eric Fromm's insight that love is action and not solely feeling. Working with men who wanted to know love, I have advised them to think of it as a combination of care, commitment, knowledge, responsibility, respect, and trust. Most of our relationships have one or two of these aspects. Patriarchal men are schooled in the art of being responsible and giving instrumental care. As a teenager, when I complained about dad's emotional neglect and abuse and his sporadic violence to mama, she was always quick to remind me that he worked hard and provided, and that he was home almost every night. And for that reason alone, we should respect and honor him. The fact that men often mix being caring and being violent has made it hard for everyone in our culture to face the extent to which male violence stands in the way of males giving and receiving love. First of all, let's talk about that. Because a lot of times you'll get people who say, well, I want to know how you feel about me. Like, especially a lot of women in relationships with, especially who have been with men, their particular spouse or partner for a long time. Sometimes they feel like they don't get that confirmation of love more often. And a lot of times some men will reply back, well, I pay the bills. I work 40, 50, 60 hours a week. I make sure your car is running good. I make sure we have food on the table. Isn't that love? And the thing is, it's like it's part of the expression, but it's not the entire thing. You know what I mean? It's kind of like it's like saying, well, I fed you, and it's like, well, I mean, you gave me a bowl of potatoes, but you didn't give me my protein, you didn't give me my veggies, you didn't give me any water to drink. And it's like, yeah, you kind of did part of the job, but you didn't do the full job. You know what I mean? And loving people is more than just that service action. You know what I mean? But that's what we're told, because doing anything else makes us seem like we're weak. Right? You know, a lot of times we guys will get called simps, right? Back in the day, it used to be, oh, you were whipped, right? Sometimes, you know, a man who actually considered the feelings of his woman. Some guys would, be in the background going whoosh, to make it seem like, oh, she had control of you. You didn't have control of her. So therefore, you're less of a man. Boy, oh boy. Patriarchy had a hold on us, boy. The first act of violence that patriarchy demands of males is not violence towards women. Instead, patriarchy demands of all males that they engage in acts of psychic self-mutilation, that they kill off the emotional parts of themselves. Let's get, boy, oh boy, right here. The first part that we get rid of is the piece of ourselves. What's missing? That piece that was here before we were told to sever it right before we hit puberty. If an individual is not successful in emotionally crippling himself, he can count on patriarchal men to enact rituals of power that will assault his self-esteem. Feminist movement offered to men and women the information needed to challenge this psychic slaughter, but that challenge never became a widespread aspect of the struggle for gender equality. Women demanded of men that they give more emotionally, but most men really could not understand what was being asked of them. Having cut away the parts of themselves that could feel a wide range of emotional response, they were too disconnected. They simply could not give more emotionally or even grasp the problem without first reconnecting, reuniting the severed parts. That's like getting mad that the vacuum cleaner's not running when the plug is not even plugged in. It can't turn on. You can't turn something on if it's not plugged in. Men literally had to take the plug out of the outlet in order for us to be considered men. So therefore, you're asking us to clean the rug like a vacuum when our plug's not even in the wall. We severed it. We severed the connection. So you can't ask us to operate on something that we're no longer connected to. Does that make sense? Because we were told in order to be real men, we had to take the plug out of the wall. We had to sever the connection. Describing a couple in family therapy, Real calls the qualities of life. Real calls the qualities the wife wanted from her husband. Quote, sensitivity to others, the capacity to identify and share his feelings, a willingness to put his needs aside in the service of the family, end quote. These are the same qualities Real points out that, quote, most boys, even in these enlightened times, have had stamped out of them, end quote. He concludes, quote, in our culture, boys and men are not, nor have they ever been, raised to be intimate, end quote. We're not taught to be intimate. And by intimate, I'm not talking about just sexual relations. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a need to have deep closeness with other human beings. We're not taught that. And we're taught that that's a feminine thing. Last year, my nephew fell asleep and we were sitting on the couch. Now, he was 18 at the time, just turned 19, I think. And he fell asleep on the couch. And then he laid his head on my shoulder as he fell asleep. Pretty much he's an adult. Did I move him and say, man, get off me, man? Nah. Left him there. He's good. It's cool. Why? I ain't going nowhere. I'm not going to be put in some uncomfortable position. And he needed to sleep. He needed to rest. But that's just a small microcosm, right? Where we have to reconnect that part of ourselves in order to allow for intimacy, even from a platonic perspective. I remember years ago, one day being at church, and my mom had one of her close friends, and they haven't seen each other for a while. And as they were talking, they were holding each other by both hands. They were just holding hands and like rocking the hands. So they were rocking the hands and holding each other's hands and talking and telling each other how much they missed them. If two men were doing that, either they'd be labeled as gay or they would think something's wrong with them mentally. But what's wrong with that? Why does that have to be either gay or something mentally ill? Why couldn't it just be two male best friends who have a closeness with each other? That's intimacy. And they could be completely straight. But why does it have to be called anything less manly than that? See what I mean? So that's what I mean. Is we're called to sever that part, to never engage with that part. Women seeking intimacy from men often find their expressions of longing belittled. Many men respond to females wanting emotional connection with emotional withdrawal, and in worst case scenarios, with abuse. Emotionally self-mutilated, disconnected, many men make overtures of emotional connection only to later undermine these with emotional abuse. They simply do not get that love and abuse cannot go together. And why should they get it? When television shows, movies, and so much else in popular culture gives us the message that anytime there is an intense passion between a couple, violence can erupt. Teaching men to understand that women and children do not feel love when they're being abused is one of the primary goals of groups that work to end male violence. Kaylee Hagan's autobiographical essay, A Good Man is Hard to Bash, begins with a story of her dating a man who she felt was abusive and that was potentially capable of physical violence. She calls his best male friend for advice about how much abuse she should endure, saying, quote, if I'm serious about him, and if I want the relationship to work, to last, there will be ups and downs. I don't think I should run away when it gets hard. I should be willing to tolerate a little abuse if I really love him, end quote. Then the friend looks her directly in the eyes and tells her, Kay, in a loving relationship, abuse is unacceptable. You should not have to tolerate any abuse to be loved. With characteristic boldness and radical honesty, Hagan shares that her understandings of love and power changed forever in that moment. She had imagined that her lover's friend would take his side. Instead, his reaction encouraged me to love myself, to take responsibility for my own well-being, and to reject violence even in its subtler forms. Hagan was lucky to receive this wisdom early in life. The fate of most women is dramatically different, especially females who worship at the throne of patriarchy. These women feel, as Hagan did initially, that to choose to be with a patriarchal man is automatically to sign up for some level of abuse, however relative. Every day, women explain away male violence and cruelty by insisting on gender differences that normalize abuse. Heterosexual women who are single and want to be with men feel that they cannot escape being victimized at some point by emotional and or physical abuse at the hands of male partners. Collective female acceptance of male violence in love relationships, even if the appearance of acceptable masks rage, fear, or outright terror, makes it difficult to challenge and change male violence. When the seemingly mild-mannered professor I lived with moved from emotional abuse to physical abuse, I felt I should be understanding, forgiving. Like me, he had been raised in a dysfunctional family. However, even though he went to therapy, even though his physical violence stopped, he never really believed that he had done anything wrong. He harbored the notion, as many men who act violently do, that I was responsible for his bad behavior. In Donald Dutton's work with men who are violent, he identifies women seen behind the male mask as a catalyst for male violence. Quote, he may apologize and feel shame immediately after, but he can't sustain that emotion. It's too painful, too reminiscent of hurts long buried. So he blames it on her. If it happens repeatedly with more than one woman, he goes from blaming her to blaming them. His personal shortcomings become rationalized by an evolving misogyny. At this point, the abusiveness is hardwired into the system. The man is programmed for intimate violence, end quote. Often men who have been emotionally neglected and abused as children by often men who have been emotionally neglected and abused as children by dominating mothers bond with assertive women, only to have their childhood feelings of being engulfed surfaced. While they could not smash their mommy and still receive her love, they find that they can engage in intimate violence with partners who respond to their acting out by trying harder to connect with them emotionally, hoping that the love offered in the present will heal the wounds of the past. If only one party in a relationship is working to create love, to create the space of emotional connection, the dominator model remains in place and the relationship just becomes a site for continuous power struggle. Women who stay in long-term relationships with men who are emotionally abusive or violent end up closing the door to their hearts. They stop working to create love. Often they stay in these relationships because the basic cynicism rooted in their experience affirms that most men are emotionally withholding, so they do not believe that they can find a loving relationship with any man. When I wanted to leave my first longtime partner, who had been continuously emotionally abusive and occasionally physically abusive, it was other women, my mother, close friends, acquaintances, who cautioned me about ending the relationship, letting me know that the man I was with was better than most men, that I was lucky. If you think Joe Biden is bad, just wait till we get Donald Trump. Yes, he's funding a genocide, but Trump would fund a genocide even worse. Uh-oh. Now, does it make sense to you? Leaving him was a gesture of self-love and self-reliance that I have not regretted. Yet I found that the observations of women who cautioned me about what most men were like were fairly accurate. The man I had lived with in partnership for almost 15 years exhibited a mixture of patriarchal masculinity and alternative masculinity. We met during the heyday of the feminist movement, and he was willing to work at creating gender equality. As it is for many men today, it was much easier for him to accept equal pay for equal work, sharing housework and reproductive rights than it was for him to accept the need for shared emotional development. It is more difficult for men to do the work of emotional development because this work requires individuals to be emotionally aware, to feel. Patriarchy rewards men for being out of touch with their feelings. God damn it, this patriarchy rewards men for being out of touch with their feelings. Whether engaged in acts of violence against women and children or weaker men, or in the socially sanctioned violence of war, men are better able to fulfill the demands of patriarchy if they do not feel. Men of feeling often find themselves isolated from other men. What do those alphas call them? Oh my God, you're a beta. So then they separate them because they see them as less than. This fear of isolation often acts as the mechanism to prevent males from becoming more emotionally aware. When large numbers of young men in this nation rebelled against patriarchy to oppose the war in Vietnam, many of them were concerned with justice. Many of them did not want to kill, but a great many simply did not want to die. To oppose war and the imperialism that promotes war placed these young men at odds with imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy. They suffered by choosing to take a stand. They were ridiculed by other men, more often than not represented as traitors. In the past 10 years, mass media has produced a number of movies aimed at boys that glorify war: Saving Private Ryan, Independence Day, Men in Black, Black Hawk Down, Pearl Harbor, to name a few. That once again make it appear heroic to die alone, away from home, fighting for a cause you may or may not understand. These movies are a part of patriarchal anti-feminist backlash. They glorify the patriarchal masculinity that enlightened women and men critique. They serve as a propaganda, recruiting the hearts and imagination of boys. Like gangster rap, they celebrate male violence on all fronts, including the domination of women. Conservative mass media offer daily lessons in patriarchal pedagogy. They tell boys what they must do to be men. In those homes where enlightened fathers daily work to repudiate violence, television reaffirms its importance, making courting death glamorous and sexy. Poor and working class male children and grown men often embody the worst strains of patriarchal masculinity, acting out violently because it's the easiest, cheapest way to declare one's manhood. If you cannot prove that you are much of a man by becoming president or becoming rich or becoming a public leader or becoming a boss, then violence is your ticket to the patriarchal manhood contest, and your ability to do violence levels the playing field. On that field, the field of violence, any man can win. How many of these men went into the police force because, well, they wanted to prove themselves? How many men in the police force have reported or confessed to being physically abusive to their partners? Men who win on patriarchal terms end up losing in terms of their substantive quality of life. They choose patriarchal manhood over loving connection, first foregoing self-love and then the love they could give and receive that would connect them to others. Feminist researchers have long since exposed the widespread domestic violence in our society. Yet since that exposure, violence against women has not declined and in some cases has intensified. Anti-feminist pundits seek to blame the intensification of male violence on women's greater equality. Yet most studies of family life indicate that in that sphere, gender relations did not undergo any major revolution. Sociologist Artie Hochschild has provided important data showing that domestic gender dynamics between men and women remain fairly sexist. Women work outside the home, but continue to do the lion's share of work in the home. Of course, men who were covert misogynists before the feminist movement felt more entitled to unleash their rage overtly as the movement gained momentum, but the rage was already present. Male violence in general has intensified not because feminist gains offer women greater freedom, but rather because men who endorse patriarchy discovered along the way that the patriarchal promise of power and domination is not easily to fulfill. And in those rare cases where it is fulfilled, men find themselves emotionally bereft. The patriarchal manhood that was supposed to satisfy does not. And by the time this awareness emerges, most patriarchal men are isolated and alienated. They cannot go back and reclaim the past happiness or joy, nor can they go forward. To go forward, they would need to repudiate the patriarchal thinking that their identity has been based on. Rage is the easy way back to a realm of feeling. It can serve as the perfect cover, masking feelings of fear and failure. Some men base their personality on being alphas. You know what's funny? Let me teach you something. The whole alpha and beta male notion was actually based on inaccurate data from a scientist that studied wolves. You see, the scientists that studied wolves actually studied wolves not in the wild, but in captivity. So, of course, then the wolves in captivity are geared a certain way where they're not acting naturally as they would in the wild. So this whole alpha male type of mentality is actually not based in nature. The real natural way that wolves actually operate is that when wolves are traveling, you'll have a line. Who's at the front of that line leading the pack? It is the elderly wolves that are leading the pack. But they're not necessarily leading the pack, they're just at the front. In the middle, you have the youngest ones, the cubs, the puppies, the pups. And then you have the alphas of the pack, or the alpha wolves, male, female, either or, it doesn't matter, or both. They lead from the back. And the pack of wolves, where you have the oldest at the front, they set the pace of the pack, because that pack of wolves, it is made so that the most disenfranchised are the ones that are ahead. So in a sense, they set the standards of society, of their social hierarchy, to be cognizant and go at that by the direction of the weakest among them. That means that the weakest ones get priority in the pack. That means the ones that are the sickest, the ones that are the oldest, the ones that don't do as well, they actually set the pace for the rest of the social circle. And who leads from the back? It's the ones that are in the prime of their lives. They're in the back, not in the front. They're leading from behind and making sure that the most disenfranchised are at the front, setting the tone, setting the stage. Because care for the most disenfranchised matters the most. So that was just a little lesson about how wolves actually operate in the wild. Let's continue. My father and my mother have been married now for more than 50 years. Dad has never relinquished his patriarchal status, and she has never challenged it. Yet by clinging to patriarchal thinking, they forfeited their chance to be happy together. The threat of violence, of emotional abuse, is always there, standing in the way of intimacy, keeping them from forgiving one another and starting over. Sadly, they are stuck in the trap of patriarchy, and remains the breeding ground for everyday violence, the subtle, intimate terrorism that intensifies resentment and closes off the possibility of knowing joy. It is not easy for males, young or old, to reject the codes of patriarchal masculinity. Men who choose against violence are simultaneously choosing against patriarchy, whether they can articulate that choice or not. In his insightful essay, Gender Politics of Men, R.W. Cano calls attention to the fact that men who oppose patriarchy remain at odds with the world they are living in. Quote, men who try to develop a politics in support of feminism, whether gay or straight, are not in for an easy ride. They are likely to be met with derision from many other men and from some women. It is almost a journalistic cliche that women despise sensitive new age guys. They will not necessarily get warm support from feminist women, end quote. Ultimately, the men who choose against violence, against death, do so because they want to live fully and well, because they want to know love. These are men who are true heroes, the men whose lives we need to know about, honor, and remember. And that's it for chapter 4. You know, it's funny because these men that reject patriarchy, what are we called now? What's the word? Oh, you zesty, right? You zesty. Or we're sassy. Okay. But at least we're emotionally more well-rounded. At least we're actively trying to be our full selves. And that whole sassy man or zesty man, that title, that moniker, I hear it mostly from women. Be real. If you want a truly emotionally mature and well-rounded man, you're going to have to accept the parts of himself that may reflect femininity, because that's an all-encompassing part of humanity. And if that turns you off, women, then maybe, just maybe, you need to look inward at the internalized patriarchy that you may have. Why do you feel that way? Did you like the stream? Go ahead and give it a like. Pushes me out into the algorithm. Thank you so very much for that. Thank you to all the patrons on Patreon, Coffee, as well as on PayPal. You guys make this possible. I just want to say a big shout out and thank you to all of you, because, well, y'all make it happen. And I appreciate you. Here we go. Here is the list of patrons on Patreon and Coffee. You guys are doing the damn thing and keeping the lights on. Literally keeping the lights on. I just want to give a big thank you to all of you. And yeah, I really need to, the aesthetics of this list is not very good. I wanted to make sure I got everybody though, but yeah, I really need to change the aesthetics of this, but I'm working on it. It's just, it's slow, but thank you so very much to everybody for being a patron on Patreon, Coffee, and sending me anything through PayPal for that. And would you like to know the tiers? I can show you. I can show you better than I can tell you. So we are going to take a look. So here are the tiers. Okie dokie, Smokey. So we have JB members, Solidarity, Comrade, Jaybefaunters, Super Jaybefaunters, Super Duper Jaybefaunters, and Mega Jaybefaunters. So thank you so very much. I want to share something with you guys really quick before I head out, because I saw this, because I think it is, yes, this is about parenting in general, but for those of us that are men that are really trying to fight against this patriarchal nature that we are inculcated with, I think we can take some lessons away from this, especially when raising boys. So I'm going to share my screen really quick because I think this is important. And I think you guys are going to get a lot out of it. Now, this is Dr. Raquel Martin. She has been saying some really, valuable things. And I think it's important to take to heart what she says here.
Martin here. I want you to watch something with me.
What traumatized me as a kid was I used to get PTSD every time I heard my parents' keys in the front door.
So I want to discuss the subtle and not so subtle ways in which our childhood environments shape us, and the delicate balance of fostering healthy growth while ensuring safety in our homes. As a Black woman, a mother, a licensed clinical psychologist, professor, and scientist, I have seen firsthand how household dynamics can deeply influence a child's sense of freedom and security. Imagine a child who, instead of seeing their home as a sanctuary, perceives it as a space where their every move is scrutinized, where the sound of keys in the door signals the end of freedom and the start of an invisible yet palpable tension. This isn't just about strict parenting. It's about an environment that instills hypervigilance in a child, that constant state of alertness to potential criticism or the need to meet spoken and unspoken expectations.
Now, I want us men to think about this when it comes to being critiqued by our fathers, or if we have single mothers that push the patriarchal, mindset in us, because there may be some of us, we might be dancing to a song that you see most women dance to, right? But if our dads come home, are we going to just stop because we don't want our dads to see us? Or if we're singing a song that's, maybe, something that you hear most women sing, then we're going to stop ourselves from that. Or, if let's say we're watching a movie and we're about to cry, we hold it back because we don't want them to see it. We don't want to get that critique, right? And so we become fearful of our parents' criticism of our manliness simply because we dare embrace other parts of our emotions that patriarchy says that we shouldn't. See what I mean? Let's continue.
Now, this scenario isn't unique, but it's particularly poignant in many Black households and households of African descent, where cultural and societal pressures often intertwine, creating an atmosphere where children must find it hard to just be. It's a place where doing the homework or chores isn't just about responsibility, but it's about proving the worthiness of leisure.
Or proving manliness. Guys.
And enjoyment. The impact of such an environment on the parent-child relationship cannot be overstated. When children do not see their home as a safe space, it alters the fundamental dynamics of trust and support. It will also lead to guardedness, where children might hesitate to share their true selves, their struggles, or their achievements for fear of not meeting expectations.
So then once you sever that part of yourself, then that also means that your family knows less about you. They don't know the full range. They don't see your full range of emotions. So therefore, they don't know everything there is to know about you because you have to sever that part of yourself. So they don't know because you don't show it. Ooh-wee. Let's bring it home, Dr. Martin.
Or being seen as not doing enough. As parents, it's crucial to reflect on the messages we're sending our children, not just through our words, but through our actions and expectations. Are we creating a home that encourages growth and exploration, or one that stifles it under the weight of hypervigilance? Are we nurturing a relationship based on mutual respect and understanding, or are we severing this relationship with unspoken tensions and spoken tensions and unmet needs? We truly need to strive to build homes and relationships where our children feel free to enjoy their childhood, to make mistakes, and to grow without the constant shadow of scrutiny. It's not just about easing up on expectations, although some of y'all could do that too. It's also about fostering an environment where our children know they're loved and valued and safe. And not only when they are meeting certain conditions or expectations, but always.
Another thing I want to bring out is that when we boys are told to sever that part of ourselves that makes us more emotionally well-rounded, we no longer feel safe to be who we actually are. That feeling of safety is gone. Because every single time somebody comes around, whether we're in a single parent household and our mother is pushing the patriarchal mindset, or we live in a two-parent household and we're around our fathers and we have to sever that, we do not feel as safe to be our complete selves. And then this translates to your male friends. Do your boys really know you? Do your homies really know you? Because you literally have to sever or block out that part of yourself. It's funny. I remember one time, this was maybe last year or the year before, Snoop Dogg posted a video on his Instagram, and he was in his car, and you see him just smiling. So you know he was, you know what I'm saying? Doing what Snoop does. But the song in the background was something you didn't think you would hear Snoop listening to. He was listening to Let It Go from the movie Frozen. And he was like, hey man, sometimes you just gotta let it go. And I was like, wait, Snoop's listening to Let It Go? From Frozen? But I thought it was the coolest thing. Why did I think it was so cool? Because he wasn't bothered by dudes going, oh man, you listen to that. That's a little girl song, blah, blah, blah. He don't care. He's Snoop. But see, that's the thing. You get to know more deeper about yourself, and your family and your friends get to know deeper parts about you. That's part of that intimacy we were talking about earlier. Let's finish this up.
So what would I do if this family were my patient? I would ask the parents first to ask themselves some questions. Have I created a space where my child feels safe to be themselves without fear or judgment or criticism? Do our interactions leave room for open, honest conversation, or might they be contributing to a sense of hypervigilance in my child? How often do I ask my child about their feelings and truly listen to their responses? Not trying to jump in with lessons, but just listen. Are there ways I might unintentionally signal that their value is tied to their achievement or behavior? Also, if you want to ask your children these questions, here's some suggestions I would give to ask to learn more. How do you feel when we spend time together? Is there anything you wish was different? Can you tell me about a time where you felt really comfortable and happy at home? Are there things I do or say that make you feel like you have to be extra careful around me or anyone else in the family? What can I do to make our home feel like a safe place for you to share your thoughts and feelings? Questions like these can really help to foster your development, your relationship with your child, and contribute to them forming a strong sense of identity and well-being and seeing you as a safe space. Dr.
So are we doing this for children? Men, are we doing this for our boys? Are we a safe space emotionally for them? You see, we can talk about being provider and protector, right, as men, but what about providing and protecting for the emotions? We always want to do it for the outside, but what are we doing for the inside, right? If you want to be a provider and protector, don't just focus on the outside. You got to focus on the inside too, baby. So yes, we're going to go into chapter 5 next. This one's going to be interesting. Yeah. Ooh, male sexual being. This is going to be interesting. Oh man, can't wait to get into it. But that's it for this reading. I cannot wait. Stay tuned for the water and the spirit reading, and then once I get into presidential, then I will get into that. And I cannot wait. So thank you so very much to everybody for watching. Thank you. If you guys would like to, you guys can put a like in, on the stream on your way out. And thank you so much to all the patrons on Patreon, Coffee, as well as PayPal. So it means the world to me. So, like I always said, water your plants, water yourselves. Leave the world better than you found it. Smoke them if you got them, drink them if you got them. If you ain't got them, then watch something funny, because joy is revolutionary. And show the kids that it's okay to be your full and authentic self without having to sever or cut any part of yourselves off. And do it by example, by reconnecting that part of yourself that you were told to sever when you were a boy, so that they don't have to sever it in the first place. Right? I love you for watching. Mwah! Forehead kisses to every single one of you, because you all matter. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Thank you so very much for watching my channel, and I deeply appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you wish to support the channel further, so I can keep bringing you content that is educational and informative, you can become a patron on patreon.com/Jaybefaunt. You can find that link in the pinned comment or in the description below. No matter what you give, you'll be supporting independent media and education that helps make the world better. Thank you so much, and you can watch more of my content here. Mwah. Forehead kisses, and have a beautiful day.